But tonight, I'd like to welcome all of you to the fourth of our talks on design, home design. And here to present this talk is Tom Ryan. The fourth talk is called Scale, Balance, and Proportion for an Approachable House. And Tom is a longtime architect and Chief Preservation Officer of Naperville Preservation. So, Tom?
So don't worry about reading the screen so much. I'm going to describe a lot of drawings that are on the screen. And the main thing here is just the title, Scale, Balance, and Proportion for an Approachable House. Everyone's heard the saying, a man's home is his castle, which historically focused on privacy and security. In today's home building environment, you might add a third focus, ego. Not any of my comments. Approachable houses can be private and secure, but are focused on scale, balance, and proportion, all under the watchful eye of a seasoned residential architect, or with a little help from this book. And this is the book I'm always talking about. This is going to be a pretty heavily influenced from this book for this talk. And that talk, it's called Get Your House Right, Architectural Elements to Use and Avoid.
Okay. Yes, sir, table. Still working on something.
Keep pointing to me. So there it is. Get your house right. Architectural elements to use and avoid. As an architect, I'm usually talking to homeowners about elements to use on their houses. But every now and then, a homeowner will ask for things in the avoid column.
Might take a while to get there.
Probably something they saw around town or on their Instagram. Unfortunately, that's when I have to bring out a photograph showing them what I don't want their house to look like. It's and there's usually no further need for explanation. The Mr. Potato Head house style comes about because an architect or builder has never seen this book or has no interest in learning anything new. They likely draw final plans without the foggiest idea what the exterior will look like, and probably have a sign in their conference room that reads, "Rules are meant to be broken." So in this talk, I'll start by presenting elements relating to scale, balance, and proportion that help houses become more approachable. So approachable can be defined typically one of those things you just feel, right? It's inviting, welcoming, contributing, respectful, open, all the good stuff. The second part of the presentation will focus on how I use these principles in my practice for houses that I design. And as a special treat toward the end, I'll reveal the reason why most front porches you see around town remain unused. This is the first part of this book when we talk about how basically how can scale, proportion, and balance impact these 6 levels of detail. So of course the detail on this is a close-up of a window mountain. It gets to that. There's many choices in doing that. The main thing I want people to do is make sure that the muntins, the grills are on both sides of the glass, so we kind of appreciate the detail in the house. That leads on to kind of a window, so it's just graduating all the way up. Window panes taller than wider is always good. That leads on to kind of the filling in the house here, proportion and scale. that is this is really the balance part of everything. The next part is the kind of the neighboring influence, right? This kind of thing. Hopefully by maybe me or other architects doing houses that follow these kind of principles, that somebody else might say, hey, I want that instead of this, instead of a McMansion, right? So I don't really, I mean, I do a lot of houses, mostly they're pretty small scale. We like to call them kind of toolbox houses as much as possible. The town is the next part. Remember, Naperville is a farming town, right? It's not, we're not like a grandiose, like stone, crazy thing. So we, that's something to keep in mind all the time, is that we don't want to necessarily like discount someone doing something with different materials. We had brick here from the bricks that were made in Von Aben. But the town is still the basics of farming community. So lots of wood frame houses, all kinds of fun colors. We can paint those houses. Yeah. And because it's a farming community, maybe that's an excuse why we have so many modern farmhouses. Here's a break. And then of course the world, this is like where if architects and it's just not just architects, a lot of my homeowners influence what I do. So if we can all keep in mind these things, we can make more houses more worthy of preservation, which means they'll stick around, which means they might get torn down. If we use natural materials, they'll last longer, less pollution. So that's really where this could help the world actually, right? Like I said, I always say pick materials with no warranties. So no warranties are stone and brick and wood. You're not going to go to your tree and say, hey, this didn't work out. So there are warranties of marketing. They're marketing, right? They sit around a table and they say, how long have you done this warranty? And they say, do it 100 years. It'll make the whole thing last 100 years. So it's not I'm a sort of like, let's try to do this as much as possible. I know it's not always possible to use natural materials all the time. But I think for the world is a good thing. I got a lot of slides, so I got to book through this. These are just roof types. They're very interesting. I mean, this is all there is, right? And I say pick two at the most. Lots of houses where you'll see all kinds of things just added onto the house because it's something they saw on the street or in Pinterest. Pinterest or Instagram. Next slide is really about architects setting the scale and the layout for houses. So architects do that. Nobody gives us a plan and says, draw this up, buddy. They basically say, here's my lot. And it's up to us to determine that scale of a house. So I present those things to a client and I have to prove why it's going to work and why it's going to be great. But we're really in charge of that. This middle section is where we start. And then these things just branch out on how additions can be done. Very simple kind of diagrams, but this is the idea, like I always say, instead of if you're doing an addition, any kind of thing like that, just spread out more than just keep going up or out in the same characteristic. These next things this is great because I can make fun of drawings that I didn't do or that there's no house out there. But this is great. This is like talks about like different roof pitches on different parts of houses. And I'm guilty of this sometimes too. I did where everybody thinks match the same roof pitch everywhere, right? Porches, railings, everywhere do the same pitches, but they should correlate to what they're doing, what they're protecting, and how much they need to protect them. So like porches, for instance, don't need to be really steep roofs, partially because they don't have the air temperature outside the roof and under the roof is the same. So we don't have to worry about ice damming and all that good stuff, even if snow sits on there for 3 weeks. So different pitches for different roofs are important. The next one here, this relates to proportion. And this is really just don't simply cut the house in half and call it a day if you're going to use different materials. This is like a sort of a more interesting way to do it. I just drove past a house on River Road. I won't say exactly where it is. But it's something they turned into a modern farmhouse, kind of white, all the board and back. And they just split the house in half and did the first part was just horizontal, flat siding. And then the next part was board and batten. Well, what happened is it came in under the windows. That line was like right into the windows. So all these like weird little cut pieces of wood under each window. Where if that thing was raised to that window, then everything above it would be clean, and it would also make the house look a little more. The first floor is more important than the second floor. So that's another. That's just I came across this and I thought this is just such a simple principle. This is very hard to tell what's going on here, but it basically says if you have a window, place it in the middle inside your house, not outside your house. So if it's placed in the middle of the inside of the house, the edge of the house has a little more oomph to it, a little more beef. So it makes it just the slightest proportion, but that makes a difference. I've toyed around with this a lot doing floor plans, and that's really the way to go. And these are, a lot of new houses, but next one is balance and proportion, centered. Okay, that's back, sorry. This one's simply showing sort of like arranging windows, right? Like, and at the top one you can see, the windows on the top are bigger than the windows on the bottom. They're not exactly centered over the windows. And then there's that weird double window in the middle that I don't know what that is, but it's something that someone just kind of threw up there. And you can see this one, just the crosses through here are representing golden section, where there's all these really beautiful ways to create houses and have proportions of windows and doors make a difference. This is interesting too. This is a typical like suburban house, but it wouldn't have a 2-story part there. That would be a 1-story garage, right? And what we typically do is that we kind of pretend that this isn't asymmetrical. It's just we pretend that's a symmetrical house. But we stick the house there, put the door in the middle, and really this is really what we should be doing, right? Because when you see this composition, it's like the door's moved over, and you think that's kind of weird, but when you squint at it, it really makes a lot of sense. And there are houses that are done like that. I've seen before. It depends on the floor plan, of course, where things are, but that's really an interesting, this book is great because it takes the exact same house and really just makes it very simple, keeping only what you're supposed to be looking at in view. Here's a kind of this is a little bit hard to see, but the top one is the typical suburban mess of, like different kind of houses, garages up front. The second one is it's cheating a little bit because they don't have garages, right? So that's, of course, that if you don't have to have a garage and you have an alley, you have this great advantage that you don't have to have a garage in front. So I totally understand that. I mean, and that's why, so right away, Marianne puts this drawing on there and says, you know what, there is a way to do it. And the way to do it is to set the garage back. Set the garage back, bring the house forward instead of the other way around. Most houses we see, they're called snout houses, right? And the garage is pulled forward and the house is set back. So we're giving prominence to the garage and the cars instead of the house. So that's what she's, advising us to do. Just this is one of my houses that we did the same thing. Really pushed that garage back. There's the builder right over there. So this was great because it was like this house was pulled out. Now we have 3 sides of this house with a porch view out. The house next to it was, I think these are both spec houses, right? Both spec houses, and they were sold before they were finished, right? So it's like that, and like it was kind of kudos to the builder for believing that we should do this, but it made a difference, and just it's one of those things that's just looking at the, kind of looking at the drawing and being like, oh, let's do that. So a lot of this is just reading and looking at things. So that's that house. We can flip my notes here. Okay, so these are easy. These are the avoid and use kind of things. Obviously, you can set. This house is a little bit like the Mr. Potato Head house, where it's just a giant roof that just keeps going and going. We see these all over the place, right? And all these elements, these roof elements, are just kind of plastered onto that big roof. This takes a little more design and a little more, but it's really the exact same house, right? The same. There's a upper floor part here. So a lot of that is just roof. A lot of money. I mean, there's a lot of money in that roof compared to this roof. These roofs are really just the house is built into the roof. Like this is from every charming town. You'll see on every rom-com, right? They never do a movie with Julia Roberts in a house like this. I tell people like, why would you want to live? I mean, not saying. I mean, these are just the dream, right? This is just what we want to focus on. I'm not saying all of our houses aren't exactly like that. Mine's not. I have a center wall colonial with a garage on the side. It doesn't stick out. I just happened to buy it that way. This is another one where just this roof part is almost as big as that house, right? And there's usually nothing up there. So, and then what, the trick here is connect the roofs all over the place. Doesn't matter what it looks like. The framer will build this. They build any, I always joke, like, even builders, all the trades are amazing. If you leave your bike in the house, they'll drywall your bike, Yeah. Really talented. I mean, things like this where they're just unnecessary doodads stuck on here. That's a very, very simple kind of form, but nonetheless, that's something. These are just more examples of avoid and use. The top half, that top house is same exact house, same exact roof, but the top house has like everything under the sun stuck on there, It's definitely a kind of a it might be someone who wants their house to be a castle, right?
Yeah.
So it's really like filling. Just because we have blank spaces on walls and roofs doesn't mean we have to fill. It's really about like dialing things back and really knowing what's essential. This house will sell faster than that house. There's more to do on that house. So the next one's. This is just. I mean, there's a lot of things that drive me nuts, but the main thing here is this. Look at this. This is a porch that was stuck on here. Too wide. They didn't think about how the roof was going to be. And look what it did. It screwed up the middle window there. So now they have to make a teeny middle window over the front porch. There was no care to kind of where these windows are going to be, so that if they wanted to do shutters, they can't. The dormers are kind of wacky. They're a little bit not. This way is lined up more, and that might have come from like a plan that was done before the outside was done. And so someone says, "Oh my God, I gotta have the window there. That's a bedroom. That's my kid's bedroom." But so the architect is stuck, and they say, "Well, we have to redesign the whole floor plan." So I always say, do this from the beginning. It's harder to do, but it really makes for a more beautiful appearance. There again, this is just a close up of dormers. Way too many dormers, right? Just very heavy on the top. The rule of thumb is this space here should be much bigger than the actual dormer itself. The next one's just sort of like the cleaned up version. This version would be less window spaces on the second floor and more sloping roofs. Like this one would be like, great, we have all these windows, but this is like a disaster. It's like a dormer, then a little sloping thing, then another dormer. It's almost unusual. So, and then we get to the next one, the dormer situation again. This is somebody that kind of said, well, I want to make sure that whole space is used for a second floor, right? And we'll just stick it, we'll make it kind of look like a dormer. I don't mind, if that's done on the back of the house, it's better than on the front of the house. Because sometimes we just need more room upstairs, and this house definitely reads better than a giant house with a giant roof on it. I think it's just a lot more comfortable to scale or proportion. And there's the dormers again. This is the big dormer that comes all the way down to the front wall. It just dominates the whole roof. It just looks too top heavy. It's one of those things again, you can't really explain it, but when you see it, you're like, it just looks like unwelcoming, I guess. Here's the ultimate dormer situation right here. This is a dormer. I did this once in a house in Deerfield. The boards actually slope to match the roof pitch. And it's a really pretty detail because George Washington used it. This is like that dormer is like the quintessential perfect dormer. I mean, everything about it. Obviously, the shingles are really very cool. This is one of the few houses that don't have a red roof in Melbourne. Okay. Now we're on to catch up my notes here. Pretty good. This is not a ton of houses in Naperville have mansard roofs. But it's interesting to do it. There's only one way to do it right, and that's this, where these windows are not, the dormers aren't blocked in the roof, or the roof doesn't come to here. It kind of this is the way to do it. The roof comes down, and then the window starts there. And that was all, you guys know the story. It was about taxes. If you put a floor up in that attic, it wasn't taxed. Those are very cool spaces now if they have air conditioning. But I always want to stay in Paris over the summer, and people are like, "Yeah, that's those aren't great spaces. Very, very hot." So that's my answer for everything. The next couple here are sort of the uncomfortable things that happen when scale's not, you don't pay attention to scale. That top one's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's really like that. It's kind of an uneasiness standing under something that looks like it couldn't really be done. There's a lot of things that can be done now with structure and steel and special engineered beams that we can make things that don't seem right, and we can make them work. And it doesn't mean that we should do it, because it still has that uneasy feeling of walking through things. This is sort of obvious. It looks like it would crumble under you if you walked under it. More things. I mean, these are just whack proportions of these architraves up on columns that either the columns are too big or the architrave is too small, right? This again, little toothpick columns. It's interesting columns. I mean, as an architect, I studied structures and had to do, and I still do the structures on all my houses. These probably would be fine. There's a lot of weight can be taken by a little toothpick column, as long as it doesn't bend to get hit. But so what we do, really, columns they're overscaled for what they really have to support. But I was past the column part. These are again, everybody's seen shutters that wouldn't work, wouldn't cover the window. That's kind of an easy, low-hanging fruit there. Unproperly sized shutters. Shutters should be the right sizes. They should have hinges and they should have tie downs. And those aren't, they're not crazy money. It's one of those things that just makes a house look so much better, especially when these things have like space between the shutter and them. That's even funnier. This is a gratuitous detail, something that's not necessary, but someone just said they wanted to have. Sometimes I'll have people that say, "I want more peaks." And I mean, I'm like, peaks? What's that mean? It's more cables, right? Like stuck all over the house. And then it's, like, this is just, it's in the attic. You don't even see that. So it's one of those things where like this is about window proportion. You just look at the house in the top and something's weird. But again, this goes back to window proportion, scale, and then ultimately window panes being taller than wider. Unless it's a modern house.
I was going to say, that's the issue.
Yeah. And so I designed a house in 1928, Spanish colonial Pasadena, and the architect he designed a playhouse, a lot of really big places in Pasadena. It's a colonial revival house, a Spanish colonial house, so that there's tons of window panes all over the house, except for the front. And it was in the 30s, so 1920, 23 or 21. And so that was, the art moderne was kind of in. So all the windows in the front have just, so actually even in the 20s, architects were falling for that, and they gave in to their client and said, okay, let me do the ones in the front, and we'll do the rest of the ones on the back. So we had the original drawing, so it was like, this columns are a never-ending discussion. Not really, they're actually really simple, but most times people screw them up. Column on the left, no good, because it's the same, it's like a pipe. That's not a real column. That's a pipe. This one is not good either. It starts big on the top and then goes small. Correct columns have emphasis, like the first third of the column is actually straight, and then it goes up, starts to taper until it gets to the top. There's all these cool things, right? I mean, the Tuscan order, Doric order, half the column diameter high. So here's a diameter. Diameters are always measured at the base of the column, not in the middle. So if that's a 10-inch column, half of that will be 5 inches. So this is 5 inches. There's all these fun little rules that you don't have to follow these because good column companies actually do this already. So you don't have to worry about that. But those, I see that all the time. I mean, this was done in Greece, right? They talk about the Parthenon, and they wanted to make sure that looking at it from far, the columns didn't look, skinny or. So does anybody know why when you go to Greece, sort of my opinion, but when you go to world history, you go to Greece, and it's pretty much, there's a lot of ruins, right? You go to a site, and you're like, this is a foundation. And then when you're in Rome, there's a lot of intact buildings, right? That are still there. It's, who invented the arch? It's the Romans, right? So Greeks, all they had columns, and then they had to figure out how to get a flat thing, piece of stone or something, across this big opening. And I'm sure it was like today, everyone's like, can we make it a little bit bigger? Can we make it a little bit bigger? The architects kept making these stones bigger, and everything just kept crumbling. And now there's a time difference. There's, 900 BC is Greek, 500 BC is Roman, and then the Romans invented concrete too. But when you go to, the arches are amazing. They will stay up as long as, the foundation does. So when you go to Rome and you're like, wow, there's like a lot of stuff intact. And it's like, it's because of the arch. Don't tell me I said that. So this is just a column detail. Columns hitting a beam and then the ceiling, not just running into the ceiling. We see this all the time on a lot of houses, just a column just coming, and this is actually done properly. This little window, right? And there's beam, and then there's a column kind of, and then there's the ceiling. Fireplaces, not fireplaces, this is a chimney. They jokes about the outboard chimney, like an outboard engine, right? So this is something to avoid. I say it's a try to avoid because the reason they say to avoid is the inside of the building. Now you've got this flat wall with a hole in it, and that's fireplace. And that was kind of like the way a lot of houses in the 80s and 90s were done. The problem with this is that if you were really heating your house, you would not want 3 sides of the thing heating your house be outside, right? So most old houses have their fireplaces, their chimneys inside the house. Anyway, so that's the outward chimney. The kind of this is like a good way to kind of do it where this part of the box is inside the house, actually making it look kind of interesting from the inside. It can be finished, in any kind of material, but that's chimneys. And like I said, these are parts of the house, but there are all those parts that you don't kind of know why you're looking at something, and you might think it looks a little strange, but that's the reason why. It's these little things like looking at shutters or whatever. The little clues. This is all door surrounds. All these slides I'm going to show you next are all about pilasters. Something that I never see on houses. I mean, very rarely see on houses. And it's right here. It's the part that is up against the house where the builder says, you don't need a column there. Just rest it on the wall, right? So, and it makes it look like clumsy. So if you can see these pictures, you can see there's no pilaster on the wall, right? It looks like the porch is just leaning on the house. This is the absolute wrong way to do it. All day long, all through history, this is wrong. It's just something that, and I put it on my plans, and most people see it, but I have to really hammer that home that has to be there. It's a means of support at the wall for the column, so it doesn't look like it's just disappearing into the abyss there. And the right way to do these, again, it's hard to see these, but that's the point. It's just really these pilasters on the wall. Those need to be there. Here again, this is a different kind of an arch, right? Same thing. These are just very sloppily done, just kind of like a conglomeration of wood, and there's an arch, and the client's happy because there's an arch, but it's horrible. It's like this thing's coming into the column. No pilasters. Again, it looks just, you can see that it looks like it's leaning. So when you drive around town, 95% of the houses will be like this, maybe more. Again, pilasters, not the old houses. Go to the historic district, and almost all of them have pilasters. What? Why? I mean, because just the way to do it. The only reason they wouldn't, for some houses have a window that's right behind this column. So you're like, well, you can't put a column there, right? But there's always a spot for a little bracket. So some kind of support that looks like the roof's coming in. So that was all about, this is another one. Like these, this is, what's the word that comes to mind here? Precarious, right? Precarious. This looks like it's going to fall on your head. And it might someday. Funny story, in Williamsburg decided they needed a year to freeze what was going on in town, and they wouldn't do any more in modern life. They wouldn't improve any buildings because it was some year. And there was a house there that's missing its columns, and they were on order, and so they decided not to put those columns back on this house. So there's a house in Williamsburg with a big front porch with no columns, and they were supposed to, but they just missed they couldn't make an excuse an exception. So that's more about. I mean, you can obviously see here both pictures. It definitely looks like those roofs can be supported by those brackets. Again, that's this whole idea of being scale, proportion, comfort, approachability coming into a house. It's not, like I said, this isn't life and death stuff. It's not going to fall on your head, but it's they're not big things to do. They're details. And a lot of times those details do get left off. If an architect isn't on top of the builder about doing it, sometimes the builder asks the homeowner, do you want those architects? And they're like done with the project. They're like, no, that's okay. Just leave them off. So it's one of those things where it drives me crazy. All right, now we're into the final part here. These are my houses that I use, all those scale proportion kind of thing. Sometimes I'm forced to do that. This house is on a 66 by 94 foot lot. Just not big. It's a 3,700 square foot house because it has a third floor. And the main thing here was to get that garage door, because the garage in the back, you can see that it's detached garage, just barely. So that's kind of like the separation between the house and the garage. And the whole idea was really to create something interesting, almost like a New England feel, where you'd walk into the backyard. There's the garage door. That's the mudroom door. So it's a little walk from the garage into the mudroom. The back of this garage actually has another garage door, kind of the party door. So they can use that garage as a party space up against the backyard. So just little, kind of tricks and fun things like that. Again, here's an example. I actually did it right. The roof is lower sloped than the regular house, right? Because we didn't need any space up there, and it would have, obviously it would have blocked windows too, right? If I would have, but a lot of times everyone will just copy the same thing and make it super steep, and you're like, why did you do that? Now we're blocking windows, and so that was I don't know if I looked at this book to do that, but I'm getting that in. This is these houses are on the walk on Saturday. This again has another detached garage. I'm very into trying to ask people to do a detached garage. I always say this at these talks, but it gives you 4 sides of natural light instead of 3, right, in your house. So you got that garage is plastered up against the house. Yeah, it's inconvenient, but it's taking away 1/4 of your natural light. So this house has windows all the way around. And it's also this is I forgot to mention on this last one. This is a concept of, we talked about the castle being in security and what's the other thing? Safety, right? Well, this is the idea of 4 zones, and the zones are public, semi-public, semi-private, and private. So the public is the sidewalk, semi-private semi-public is the space between the house, and then we get to a semi-private and a private finally. So having those layers gives people that sense of security too. There's just, not that someone's going to come to your house to do anything, but it gives you a sense of privacy. from the street. The porches did. Now, if they were used more often, then that would be great. But they still at least do that, and they break the house down into kind of manageable pieces. Whether this porch is actually underneath the main house. When I talk about scale and balance, these 4 windows are in 2 separate rooms. So I wanted them to look like they were abandoned windows, but I didn't want them to be in one room. So there's actually 2 mirrored rooms here on either side. This house is slightly bigger. This is 4,100 square feet. There.
What is that at the top above the 4 windows? Is that a little outside space?
Yes, it is. Crow's nest. Yeah. Yeah. This started my like building these houses and thinking like, why don't we use that space that we build up there for something? So I opened up that portion. There's a spiral stair on the 2nd floor that goes up to this space, and yeah, it's so popular that they have friends over, and they talk about how no one wants to leave the space upstairs. So Richard has to go up and down with pizza boxes and beer, and they have a little kitchen upstairs.
Widow's Park.
Yeah, Widow's Walk is a these are like sort of a crow's nest. I mean, it's just something fun. And it's already there. I mean, it's a very heavily detailed space upstairs. It's all like boat wood, like teak, so it doesn't get wrecked. The railing, the siding continues up there. So this is sort of a shingle style. This is a shingle style house, but we did a lot of research into kind of materials, all natural materials, all wood and stone. Here's the pilaster back there. See that? This is another thing is scalability. These railings are only. You can see they're lower than the normal railing. Now they want us to do 42-inch high railing, which is like almost double that. Almost looks like a cage, right? So the way I do this is I keep this ground 29 inches or less. So that doesn't mean we don't need a railing. So those are just decorative. They're not by code. They're just so you can sit on this side and talk to someone on the porch. But it definitely gives the porch a little more height. It's just one of those things to play with. The back of this house, again, this is a screen porch, so the fireplace. Roof doesn't have to be as steep, right? Again, it's sort of a new thing for me. When I was researching this talk, I was like, hey, that's the roofs being different really makes a difference on a house, not just propping up everything to be the same. So the garage is back here. It's a detached garage. Again, I always tell people sometimes they ask me, why are my houses so expensive to build? And I say, because all sides are as good as the front. Right? Like this, and in my Instagram post for this house, I said, if someone comes to me and says they don't care about what their neighbors see, so do whatever you want on the side, I didn't say you might not be my client, I mean, that kind of like, it's one of those things where like, I'm proud to spin this house around any side to be the front. And it's just like most houses in Naperville, they're like, they use plastic on the back if they could. So, because they don't care about the neighbors. All right, so here's, this is sort of my, the last house I'm going to show you, not this one. This is an idea, so this is an interesting idea. I born in New York, so a lot of my cousins are on Long Island, so we would visit my cousins, and they had this cute little house in Massapequa, and the kitchen was in the front, right? It was like a little silo garage a garage in the back with a side entrance into the kitchen. Right next to the kitchen was a little dining room, then a family room, and window and some bedrooms on the back. And as we walk those neighborhoods, I think this is so cool. Like, I can see everybody in there. Like, it's kind of fun. Like, it's a responsibility to the street to really enliven the street and make it safe and make it interesting. Oh, there's somebody walking by. So their kitchen was on the front. I started the research, and it's like, this house is the same way. That's the kitchen right there. That's the kitchen in the dining room, right? You walk in there. That's the living room over there, and the bedrooms are on the back. So when the next house I'm going to show you, we started to talk about the plan, and this house is right next to the gigantic house in Naperville, the one that's downtown. So we had a, we talked about the house and we didn't want it to feel like it was subservient to the big house. But we also wanted to make it a jewel box and
Make them look like the servants' quarters.
yeah, right. So that's the last house we'll walk by on Saturday. So most houses in the world basically now, their kitchen and this is the porch part. Their kitchen and living spaces are on the back of the house, right? And their front porches are on the front, right? And right behind those porches are living rooms and dining rooms, spaces that no one is in, ever, right? Almost ever. So they're dark. The porches are dark. They're not connected to those outside spaces. So it really takes an effort to go sit on the porch. You have to walk through the house with your drink or whatever. So it got me thinking about this house, and this is the house, and we started to think about the plan. And we're like, the homeowners were like, they lived in the house next door, and they said, whatever you do, we need to have a porch that we can watch the world go by. Sure. Right? That's kind of like that's the most important part of this house. Everything else is like, although it was a hard program, but it was that porch is really important. So right behind this porch is a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room on the front of the house, right? So, but what that means is that when they're inside, they're directly connected to the porch. So they can always just pop it. It's really an extension of the spaces that are most frequently used. Where most houses, it's the opposite, right? That the porches on the front are dark and usually no one's around. So, and this house is a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath house. It's a first floor primary bedroom that's in the back, similar to that house that I showed you before, and it's gorgeous. I mean, the inside of it is just, this is that house that we're gonna get to walk through on Saturday.
How many square feet?
It's just over 3,000. Yeah. This is like, I mean, I'm most proud of this house, really, of most houses that I've done, just because of the size of it and what's inside, and sort of how people have reacted to it. And we're always worried it was next to the mansion, right? But it's like, so, and we would joke about the porch being a place where, it's a place to watch the world go by, but you can judge people too, We came up with a new, there was the judging for, like kind of like not a harsh judging, why are those kids not with their parents, So that's yes.
What are the things on the edge of the there?
Those are ice guards.
Oh,
So it doesn't
okay.
kill
So ice doesn't. Okay.
Yeah,
That
it's
makes sense.
and this house has a lot of, I mean, this is all the rafters, so we're exposing the rafter tails, being honest about how the house is built. This is a big kind of a question between, because a lot of the old houses, the rafters are 32 inches apart. So we always debated whether should we make them look like an old house or just be honest and show what it is. So that's what we did. This is a kind of, it's brick back here. This is siding here. This is all natural materials again. But this is sort of, I saw this in Texas, in San Antonio one day, and I was like, that's so interesting, because why would you make this brick, right? Because it'd be hard to support. You'd have to have a beam here. So just, again, a little honest kind of nod to materials and what else? The
Type of metal is the roof.
it's a steel roof. It's called, yeah. These new roofs they're called, it's galvalume, and it's self-healing. So if it gets nicked, the rust will self-heal and it'll never rust.
Yeah.
There's no fastener, there's no exposed fasteners. And these are wood headers across here. Again, the pictures that kind of don't do it justice. Inside again, this is looking from the kitchen down to the family room. So all of this is porch over here, right? So it's kind of like you're always in contact with people walking by, cars. I mean, I like living on a corner because I really enjoy seeing people walk and all that stuff. So this is like the epitome of that kind of house where you could really enjoy and it's northern, So it's not like, like Southern Light, but that was our lot. And it was like, you can see all the light. There's no lights on in this house. This picture was taken without lights, just the light streaming in. This is, you can see this black cabin in here. That's the side of that black cabin in this picture. And that goes up to the second floor. So it really the house is really like, it all fits together really like a jewel box because it's not a big house, but when you see it inside, it's just like the last thing you think about is the size. I always tell people about size of houses. No one leaves a great party and says, that was a great party, but the house is like so small. Yeah, no one says that. Right? So it's like, stop worrying about how big your house is. And then this is the family room. Again, lots of light. This is looking out over the porch. And that is the presentation. This is our postcard. And keep it simple, less is more in almost all cases. Simple doesn't mean plain if you're using timeless architectural principles. Keep the overall building scale to a minimum. With larger houses and additions spread out, not simply supersize. Reasonable size houses cost less to build, condition, and keep clean. And I might design plans and exteriors simultaneously to avoid ending up with a Mr. Potato Head house. And then this one is about, they say, unless you live in a traditional neighborhood built prior to 1940 or a modern enclave created between 1930 and 1960, don't look to neighboring houses for design inspiration. I got a lot of people that say, hey, show me a picture of a house. I'm like, that's not what we're doing. That's not good. Yeah. Just because it's in your neighborhood doesn't mean that it's right. So those were taught before 1940 and before. Almost every house an architect touched, whether sometimes with plan books, but a lot of times individual houses. So they just, when you look at the drawings back then, they're beautiful. They really cared about all these details. And then the 1930 to 1960, there's a lot of really great mid-century modern houses that are pretty cool. I never was really like interested in it that much, but now the more I become interested in it, it's pretty wild. I mean, if anybody likes Palm Springs here, they have an amazing mid-century modern beach weeks that they do, and we went to that a couple years ago. Fantastic. It helps that it's in February too. Getting off that plane and in the airport, you're like, why do we live in Chicago? And then, of course, hire an experienced residential architect to learn the basics of timeless design using your book. And then this is my guy, Leon Creer. He just died. Fantastic architect, Luxembourg, I think, right? Anyway, just really a kind of very comical ways of looking at architecture. That's why I kind of like him. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for